I'm Bernadette O'Connell, the current president of the Irish Landscape Institute. You're very welcome today. We have as our speaker Mary Jackson, and Mary is a secondary school teacher and a chartered landscape architect of 30 years. Mary says that combination of qualifications is not unique, but I think it is, and it sounds exactly right for teaching people how to use school grounds. So Mary's going to give us an introduction into the Learning Through Landscapes programme and on school ground designs. Mary is also the co-founder of the International Schools Alliance. So thank you very much, Mary, and we're very interested to hear what you've got to say.
Brilliant, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. I'm quite pleased by the number of people we've got here. I'd be interested to see if we would get the same number of landscape architects on the other side of the water, but it's fantastic to know there's a lot of interest in this topic, so thank you for joining us. Yeah, so that's me. Head of Education and Communities at Learning Through Landscapes. I've been there a long time, so I'll talk a little bit more about who LTL is and what we do, and we tend to call ourselves LTL just for being nice and short and sweet. So this is where my computer, there we go. So what I'm going to do is do a few introductions, talk about why school grounds matter, you can see everything here, and then really why it's important that we have a skilled profession of designers, and what happens if we don't. And then a little bit about the Learning Through Landscapes accreditation program. What we do is we run a short training program, a couple of days for designers who are interested in working with us and helping schools develop their school grounds to the benefit of children and the staff and local communities. And I'll introduce that program and tell you a little bit of what that is about. So that's me. Secondary teacher has been said. Yes, about 30 years experience of school grounds, which is kind of quite scary really when you think of that. It's about as long as LTL's been going. We were founded as a charity in 1990, and yes, I'm co-founder of the International School Grounds Alliance, which is a group of organisations right around the globe who support schools in the use, design and management of their grounds. So some people are academics looking at the research behind different aspects of school grounds use and design. Some are educators, some are designers, some are play specialists. So there's a real range of people right around the globe who are supporting schools and helping them, and those who work with them, ensure that children have the best possible access to great school grounds. So Learning Through Landscapes as a whole, our vision is just basically that every child has that opportunity while they're at a school. I think there's somebody with a microphone on that might want to turn it off. So that everybody while they're at school, from their early years right the way through to the end of their secondary education, has access to spaces for nature, connection, for play, for outdoor learning right throughout their education. We feel that is what should be a fundamental part of every child's education, and it hasn't been over the years. And there's changes in this around the world, and it's becoming more and more important and relevant to people that this is happening. So as an organisation, we're a charity, and what we do, we have a membership scheme, so you can become a member, and we're just updating that at the moment, and there'll be a kind of membership for professionals as well as for schools. And we provide support. We've got a whole load of publications and resources. We've been helping the Department for Education in England and Architecture and Design Scotland as well, looking at resources and how we can help ensure that school grounds are designed as well as they can be for schools. So there's resources there that we've produced over the years. We run training and conferences. I mentioned the kind of training, our accreditation, and I'll talk about that later. We also have quite a few people around the globe who are LTL accredited. So we have people in Canada, in Australia. Latest person to come on the course was from Chile and Belgium. So we have people all around the world who've done the training with us. We have two sorts of training. We have those for educators and play specialists, and then a specific one for designers. We run a number of projects and programs at the moment. In England, we're specifically working with the Department for Education, Natural History Museum and the RHS, creating a nature park across England. So the idea is that schools will look at the survey their grounds to see how biodiverse they are, and then help to increase the biodiversity across their grounds in response to kind of the impacts of climate change. So that's quite an interesting program that's just coming on stream. We also have been very involved with research, supporting people doing PhDs and things like that. We do consultancy and advisory visits to schools to help them think about their grounds. And we've also, as I said, got a lot of international links as well. We've been working quite a lot across Europe recently. And we are very proud to have Sir David Attenborough as our patron. He is one of our founding trustees, which is very unusual. He's a patron of quite a few charities, but we think we're the only ones. He was a founding trustee. And he's been very supportive over the years. And you can see there that he really supports what we do, and this idea that children need opportunities to get outside, to discover and to learn outdoors. So it's fantastic having him there as our patron. So what I would really like, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to see it or not, but if you could put in your chat, in the chat, please. I'm going to see if I can see the chat. I'm not sure I can while I'm presenting, but I will look at it later. Do you work with schools now? Have you worked with schools before? It's just trying to get a flavour, and I wonder if one of the ILI team could just give me a flavour of who is here. So have you designed school grounds in any other country? Do you work on new builds, existing, and do you work, what age group do you work with if you do? So it's just a flavour of an understanding of who you are, whether we've got people here who've done a lot of school grounds design, or people who have done none at all and just interested in learning more. So if you can just pop a couple of things in, and if I can ask if anybody's responding, if I can just ask it, because I can't see the chat, I'm afraid, so somebody from the ILI could have a look and see if there's responses coming through.
Yes, there's a few people saying that some schools in Ireland, a couple of schools just starting, a few national schools, landscape architect Dublin City, designing spaces adjacent to schools and working with schools in the design of their local parks.
Great.
And yeah, some have 2 or 3 projects on Northern Ireland.
Okay, that's lovely. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. And I will have a look at those later when I can see them all as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so they're still coming in. So there's.
Oh, okay. Do you want a couple more?
I'd say there are just a few small schools from quite a few of us here.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So kind of I've put a range of reasons why school grounds matter just up on the screen, whether that's nature connection, which we know is really good for mental health, whether that's developing skills that we're going to need in the future, those green skills, including landscape architects, that we're going to need in the future for ensuring that we're, you know, coping with everything that's changing on the planet, whether it's that it's really great to be outside and you can be noisy and you can be loud and you can be big and you can be bold outdoors, really creative outside, all those things. But really the most important thing is the thing that I've highlighted there at the end, that they matter to children and young people. Often the inside of schools is seen as the teacher's space. So that's what belongs to the teachers, but actually the grounds are often the children, the pupils' domain, and they see it as theirs. And so that's really important, that school grounds really matter to children and young people. So you probably have come across these 5 steps to mental health well-being and health. And school grounds really managed to kind of hit all these. I'm going through a few kind of the key reasons why school grounds are important and why we need to think areas we want to think about when we're designing school grounds. And I can only touch upon these kind of now. I haven't got that long. So I'm really touching upon these and just highlighting some of those things and key points as we go through. So connecting with other people. This is where you make your friends in your school grounds. This is where you have friends, you lose friends, you fall out with your friends, you remake those friends, but so important. But it's not just your peers, but also you connect potentially with teachers, midday supervisors, all those other people who share the grounds with you. It's also a space to be physically active. Now, we kind of know that, we understand that, because we just think of, I'm a PE teacher by training, so I believe those sports places are also important. But actually, for many children, that is not their preferred way of being active. So one of my colleagues in the States, Professor Lois Brink, has been doing some research about what makes the best school grounds for the most people in terms of activity. So if you have the traditional, playground and playing field, then the boys will tend to dominate and take over. There will be some girls that join in with the football as well, but it tends to be the boys that dominate. But if you create a nature-rich environment with lots of natural play features and things like that, then everybody is more active. It doesn't reduce the activity of the boys, but what it does, it raises the activities of the girls, the activity levels of the girls. Now, she's very early in her research, but it's certainly something that is worth considering when we're thinking about what school grounds should be like. Taking notice, as you can see with these secondary school pupils here, really finding out what is around you, taking that time to slow down. There are definitely times when we want to just sit, maybe talk with our friends or even be on our own, but having those opportunities to slow down, look at what is around us, see the natural world around us, feel the wind on our faces, all those kind of things. Slowing down, taking notice is really important. Keeping learning seems obvious in a school, doesn't it? But actually, it's not just the pupils that need to be learning, it's the staff as well. And it's the range of learning that we can do in school grounds, whether that is learning about the natural world, or it could just as easily, behind me, I have got some angry birds. And I use those for teaching averages and creating bar charts and things. We fling them with a catapult. Doesn't matter what your grounds are like. We fling them with a catapult, measure them, and then everybody has some data, a measurement that their angry bird flew to. And then you can analyze it. We put it in bar graphs, we look at averages, we look at percentages and all sorts of things. So loads of learning can take place in the school grounds. Giving to others. This is a really nice one that I think sometimes gets missed. This is thinking about, actually, can we engage our pupils to think about the other pupils, not only in the school now, but who are going to come into the school in the future? Can we think about others and how what we're doing to the planet affects other people around different parts of the globe? So it might be planting, it might be creating raised beds, it might be building some structures in the school grounds, but thinking about others and not just ourselves. And those are the 5 steps to mental well-being. And we've added one because I think everybody kind of since COVID, even if they didn't realize it before, has realized that spending time in nature is absolutely vital to mental health and well-being. Now, you could argue you could, run nature all through those other 5, but I think it's worth kind of pulling it out as an extra one. And this is where school grounds can really give children that opportunity for daily and regular contact with nature. So this is kind of just taking that last element and kind of thinking about how we can do that in school grounds and how we can ensure that takes place. And as I say here, it's not just the children and young people, it's also the staff as well, because their mental health and well-being is just as important. And interestingly, some research has been shown that teachers who teach more outside are more likely to stay in teaching. Retention is higher. And I think, you talk to those teachers that teach outside. Yeah, we see the ones that are enthusiastic, but they really see the benefit for themselves as well as their pupils. So it could be incorporating more natural features into the school grounds. So that can be using natural materials, that can be the type of planting we do. It can just be having access to the weather. It can be through play. How do we design those places to enable children to connect with nature through play? Here we've got a child who's connecting through nature, 2 children connecting through nature through their learning. They're looking at the adjectives they might use to describe those leaves in their hands that they've collected from their grounds. A lot of schools are growing fruit and veg in their grounds, hopefully maybe cooking it and eating it as well. So that's another opportunity to bring nature in and encouraging it within the school grounds and giving those regular access to nature. It might be through clubs, things like eco clubs or gardening clubs. It might be by bringing the community in for community activities. And this is something that I think in the UK, we're not very good at, bringing the community in. And around the world, I see much more access to the community coming in to school grounds in the evenings, in the holidays, and all times. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute as well. Then school grounds are also an important place for play, and also a very important place for children to understand risk. And Julian Richter, as you probably are aware, produces some fantastic play equipment and has done for many years. And he is talking about the difference between risk and danger. So many people get it wrong. They think that risk and danger are the same thing. And that can be difficult. So as he says here, one of the biggest barriers to getting the right play structures, play features in school grounds and everywhere else is the people who ask for them. And that's partly because of this not understanding about children needing risk. And they need different levels of risk as they grow up. I mean, that child there is 3 or 4 years old. That is, I'm guessing, a couple of meters off the ground, that he's on a platform which probably wasn't designed for him to stand on. But that's in Japan, and those children learn those physical skills and engage with risk all the way through their kindergartens. So teaching and learning. It's really interesting looking at different curriculum around the world. The English curriculum is one of the very few left that is knowledge-based. So it's really nice to be able to kind of look at both the Irish curriculum and the Northern Ireland curriculum, and to see how much more rounded they are, and that the importance of kind of social and emotional and scientific education are all in there. In Northern Ireland, the world around us, environment and society, these are things that are not in, other than maybe in early years, they don't kind of come through in the rest of the English curriculum. Curriculum for Excellence in Scotland, yes, and the new Welsh curriculum, much more. But unfortunately in England, we don't have that. But it's not just the science and environmental stuff that is important outdoors. There's other learning that can take place outside. So here we've got children. They've measured the dimensions of these containers. They've worked out what the volume should be. Then they fill them up with water and see if it was what they calculated it to be. So really quite deep scientific and mathematical learning there. We need them to explore the arts outdoors. We need them to think about personal health and well-being, maybe through growing, maybe through exercise, all those things. It could be celebrating festivals outside. So many different areas of the curriculum can also be delivered outside in school grounds. So we need to ensure we've got great grounds to enable that to happen. And this is probably kind of one of the highest issues of the moment, and the things that are really, we are looking carefully at. How we design for the 21st century. School grounds, certainly in the UK, have been designed kind of for, many years ago, often, 19th, and if we're lucky, 20th century. And they weren't designed with climate change in mind. And my assumption is, I've seen school grounds similar in the north, but my assumption is probably similar in the south, in that, school grounds have been going for many years without us having to think about climate change. And actually, this is more and more important, and it needs to underpin the design of school grounds. So this is a site here. This is in Barcelona. So a really, really hot area. And just look at some of the ways they are adapting their school grounds. This is part of a Cool Schools project, research project that's going on in Barcelona, Paris, Rotterdam and Brussels. There's research looking at the impacts of creating cool spaces in grounds, in school grounds. We're also working with Architecture and Design Scotland to create some guidance for designers and for schools in Scottish schools. So this is very much I hate to say a hot topic, but it is. So looking at this adaptation in Barcelona, new school, first of all, looking at the surfacing we've got there. We don't have that dark tarmac. We don't have those dark safety surfaces that are just going to absorb the heat and then radiate it out. Last summer, we know that in temperatures of 40 degrees that we had last year, that plastic grass, for example, went over 90 degrees Celsius. These are not surfaces that are sustainable. We're using plastics, we shouldn't be using those. We should be looking to see how we use natural materials and materials that don't increase that heat, that keep the spaces as cool as we can. So as I said, that's kind of a gravel, sand bound surface there. We've also got to the right, you'll see there's shading, a transition shaded space. So it's really important that the building and the grounds are designed together. And that the architects understand this as well as the landscape architects. And there's designed it in a way that a lot of shade is falling over this courtyard, but where there isn't, they put extra elements in, whether that's planting, whether that's the pergola, or what else. What is interesting is that the bit on the top right there is a sports court, because this is its school grounds pretty much, and that sports court absolutely bakes. And they put the building in the wrong place, so there's no shade there. But they've also discovered that if you put too many shade sails over the top of a space like that, the hot air gets trapped underneath and it gets even hotter. So there's a lot that they still haven't got right, but that's what we're learning, and it's very much a learning process at the moment. A lot of schools as well, looking at the Global Development Goals and how they use their grounds and how their grounds are designed to support those too. So the next thing, kind of the importance of skilled designers. I'm going to show you 2 slides in a minute, and they're both school grounds, and in a lot of ways they're very similar. And I want you to, I've looked at these 5 headings as we've gone through: mental health and wellbeing, connecting with nature, play and risk, teaching and learning, and designing for the 21st century. And I'll give you a couple of minutes just to write note those down, because what we're going to do is have a quick look at the next 2 images and see how they support these different areas. While you're doing that, I'll just tell you about the space on the right. This is school grounds in Berlin. They've been transforming their grounds from grey deserts to amazing natural play spaces over the last 30 plus years, after feeling that their children's behaviour was not good, and they put past that down to having very barren playgrounds. So they have done amazing jobs. If you get the chance to go over and visit them, I highly recommend it. So I'm going to show you 2 images. So we're going to look at, I've got to write down what we're looking at as well, because otherwise I'll read. Teaching and learning and 21st. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at, what I want you to do is think of those different things. What does this design support in terms of mental health and well-being? What does this design support in terms of, what was the second one I put in? I can't read my writing now.
Connecting with nature.
Thank you very much. I should have known that. Yes. So what does this design go? It says it all, really, doesn't it? Then play and risk, then teaching and learning, and then looking for sustainability and designing for the 21st century. So I'm just going to get you to kind of think about that and just kind of write a few notes for yourself. And then I'm going to put on another image, and I want you to think about that. And then I'll just go back over them and just kind of reflect myself on those that hopefully is useful. So here, in some ways very similar, a simple slide in a playground space, school grounds. So again, thinking about mental health and well-being, what this is addressing in that space, nature connection, play and risk, teaching and learning, and the 21st century. So I'm going to kind of, because we haven't got much time before discussions, and we can come back to this maybe in the discussion if people want to talk about it. So I'm going to go back, if I can, if it will let me. It won't let me go to the previous image. That's annoying. Well, if we remember that previous image, it was a slide very much in this similar shape, and it had lots of safety surfacing underneath, and then it had a tarmac area with a bike track, a few trees in the background, and a building. Now, looking at that, very difficult for children to connect with nature in that space. There are a few trees in the background. Mental health and well-being, it's very austere space. It's not nurturing. If you compare it to this space where we've got trees and shrubs and natural materials coming in all over the place, you know, it's a very different feel to it, and that will impact on the children that use it. Again, nature connection, nature everywhere here. It's right at the heart of the playground. It's not just round the edges, it's at the heart, and it's in the materials that are used for this space as well. Play and risk, well, with the previous slide, you could go walk up the side, slide down, walk up the slide, slide down, walk up the slide, slide down. And it was very prescriptive and very little risk in that. You've got the safety surfacing underneath, very little challenge. Once you've done it a couple of times, what do you do next? Whereas this one, yes, you may go up the steps the first time and down the slide. Next time, you might try and climb up the side. You might play under the slide. You might use run up the hill. You might use that hammock. You might go and run in the bushes and get lost in the bushes. There's so many more play opportunities, or affordances, as we tend to call them. So the range of ways that you can play in those spaces. And for those of you going, oh yeah, but what about the costs? Our colleague Bernadette Teichmann in Germany will tell me that this type of space is cheaper to put in than the all asphalt and traditional playground. So just a thought about that. And isn't it worth it, even if that investment is needed a little bit more? Teaching and learning. So we can come here, we can learn about the different species. We can learn on both of them. We can learn things about friction and things like that on the slide. We can look at areas, we can look at design. We can look at the kind of principles you would use as a designer, learning about the scale of things, how do you draw a plan, all those kind of things. You could do that with both, but the other one, not exactly inviting. You can learn about shade, you can look at different surface temperatures, how that is affected and how that might be because of the impacts of climate change. So a lot there, and this is much more sustainable than putting down plastic and tarmac. You're thinking about where the materials are coming from right through to the end use, kind of things that designers are used to thinking about all the time. So the other thing that we do is we believe that pupils should be the heart of the design process. They are the experts of the school grounds. Just an example, I once visited a school and I had a bit of training with the staff after the school, and I said, right, you know the elephant that is in your school grounds? And they say, excuse me? I said, you have a full-size elephant in your school grounds, and literally kind of the elephant in the room, only in the ground. And half of those teachers didn't know there was an elephant there. But if you went outside the back of the hall, of the dining hall, in the paving outside, there was literally in the paving, a pattern of a full-size elephant. And there probably wasn't a single pupil that didn't know it was there, but half the staff didn't. So it's really important that pupils are absolutely the experts in your school grounds. So one of the things we do is within the design process is we look at how do you facilitate with pupils? How do you properly engage with them? We don't say, oh, draw us a picture of what your ideal school grounds is like. What we try and do is we ask them to think, what do they want to be able to do in the school grounds? The same when you're talking with staff, teaching staff, non-teaching staff. What experiences do you want your children to have? And then you as designers can create a unique space that is right for the pupils and not just, oh, something off the shelf that somebody's seen elsewhere. So just to kind of draw that to an end, really just talking about our accreditation process, we go into all of those in a lot more detail. The training can either be 2 days in person, or what we're doing with landscape architects is we're tending to do kind of 4 online 2-hour sessions over a number of weeks, and then we bring you together with all the educationalists. And this really is a huge benefit if we can bring the educationalists and the landscape architects together. Because there are things that you won't understand. You can ask them about the kind of education or play side of things, but they also don't always appreciate what a landscape architect can do. And the difference it makes having your input into a school grounds project. Now, obviously not all schools can afford a project that can pay for a landscape architect. But if there is significant funding, then it's absolutely worth it and the benefits are huge, but not all schools appreciate that, and certainly not all of our kind of educationalists or play specialists appreciate it either. So it's really important we get you there if at all possible, because it makes such a huge difference to that course. So we then have an assessment, which is there's a written assessment and a portfolio, just giving us some ideas and demonstrating that the kind of work that you do. We always require at least 2 years of experience of working with schools before you can become LTL accredited. And in that portfolio, we ask how you've worked with schools, that consultation process. And if you haven't done it the way that we recommend, then you could say how you would have done it. And sometimes it's not possible. We do understand. We kind of tell you the ideal. Sometimes it's not always possible. So, but we want to think about we're working towards and getting as close to the ideal as we can. And then when you pass that, what we do in the UK, we ask for specific professional documents. So in England, that would be things like DBS, which is our safeguarding and things like that. So, and making sure that you've got all the relevant insurance, those kind of things. And then you can show this tick, which we rather like, on whatever you produce as you move forward. So just to kind of go through what that course and accreditation covers, we talk about the things we've talked about today, the importance of nature connection. This, by the way, is a kindergarten in Denmark, an outdoor kindergarten in Denmark. We talk about risk and play, and we go into more depth about that. The International School Grounds Alliance, we've produced a risk declaration that talks about the importance of risk for children, and also references a lot of the research that goes with that. All the things we've talked about, we talk about consulting with children and adults. We look at a range of techniques of how you can get everybody involved and properly engage even the youngest of children. We look at how you can actually engage early years, so under fives as well, in a meaningful way. We look at some of those practical things that make a space work for schools. So I've been with a landscape architect who'd done a lot of schools designed over the years, and he created, the school asked for a pond. They wanted to do some pond dipping. And so he created an amazing wildlife pond. Only problem was there was no real access for the pupils to get to it. There was no dipping platform. There was no pathway. So it was just mud to walk through. I mean, it's fantastic for wildlife. And no place for pupils to sit and learn and do that, take their lessons outside. So it's thinking about all those things, how a space is going to be used by the school. And we also look at examples from around the globe. But as I say, I've been fortunate enough to literally go around the world looking at school grounds. So, and many of my colleagues have as well. So we bring some of that knowledge to the table too. And then, as I say, we have a design task that we bring you together with some of those educationalists and kind of look at some case studies, how you would apply that knowledge. So that's how it works. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm ready for any questions that anybody may have.
Hi, everybody. So if you want to put any extra questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hands, unfortunately I can't see everyone at the same time, so maybe it's best to just tell me in the chat and we can get those to Mary. Thank you, Mary, that's very interesting presentation. Maybe I could start you off with could you speak more about the risk declaration that you
certainly can. So it took a few years to put together, but there is a growing understanding around the world of the importance of risk for children. So when you're, kind of toddlers and younger, we have to be very aware that they can't make those decisions themselves. And so we have to look after the environment and make sure that they are safe and they're not going to hurt themselves. As children get older, they need to build their experience to risk, so that when they are adults or when they're older, they know where their boundaries lie. They can recognize when something is dangerous and they can make sure they stay safe. And to be able to incorporate those kind of features into school grounds is really important, so that we can add in managed risk that is safe and but also is challenging, and that there is risk. And if children can see the risk, then they can deal with it. It's the hidden risks and the hidden dangers that become the problem. And so the risk declaration kind of summarizes all that and the importance of risk. The website is internationalschoolgrounds.org. And if you go there, you will see the risk declaration. You'll also see information about the next International School Grounds Alliance conference, which is in September in Brazil, if anybody wants a nice trip to Brazil. But at Learning Through Landscapes also, we talk about the importance of using a risk-benefit approach, so that you're not just looking at what the risks are, but you're also looking at what the benefits for the children are as well. And so that you get a balanced approach to that. I can see there's a question there. How do you deal with risk-averse teachers? It's not easy, and it's not a case of going, well, everybody else is doing it, so why aren't you? And I personally had kind of experienced this with my local head teacher, who was very risk averse, and I'm afraid I failed. So I can't guarantee an answer, but part of it is looking at what the health and safety execs say. They produced a wonderful document that is basically in the UK, so I don't know the equivalent in Ireland, but in the UK, the health and safety exec, who are the people who oversee all the legalities of health and safety in the UK, they have produced a document talking about the fact that we mustn't wrap our children up in cotton wool, and that we must allow them to be exposed to risk and learn about how to manage risk. And I think it's understanding that you introduce that gradually, and helping adults understand that you introduce it gradually, and helping them to have a go, letting them think about those benefits. The most dangerous thing most children do each day is get in a car and travel to school. Much more dangerous than any of the things while they are there. I would also say, you know, some people have asked me about kind of different pieces of equipment outside, and are they risky? And well, we use risky materials and implements inside. A pencil or a pair of scissors could be really dangerous in the, you know, if used wrongly. If you're poked in the eye by a pair of scissors, that's your sight gone. But teach children how to use those resources carefully and in a safe way. And it's about doing that outside and showing that actually, for their children to be safe, they need to know how to understand danger. They need to understand risk, and then ultimately they'll be much safer. And also, going back to Berlin, where they had children running around all over the place with nothing there, those playgrounds, you have much more risk than you do, many more accidents in those places than you do in a nature-rich environment. And if you look at a school accident book, that's always a good sign. And you'll see most of those accidents come when they're playing football rather than when they're coming fast. And as a PE teacher, I taught children to deal with risk. I taught them to throw literally lethal weapons. I taught them how to throw a javelin, how to throw a discus. Those were originally designed to kill people, but you learn how to teach it in a safe way, and you learn the children learn how to use them in a safe way. And that's just the same kind of idea. I hope that helps.
Mary, Terence has asked, do your school grounds have ROSPA inspections? I suppose for us, we kind of are pretty aware of how good risk is for children. Our problem would be if we design a playground in a public open space, it's getting inspected every 2 weeks. So, and once it passes those inspections, then everybody knows, okay, you have to fix something, or you're liable, or you're not liable. So in a school situation, how does that work? And is that onerous then for the school committee and so forth?
That is a good question, and that I'm not entirely sure I know the answer to be honest. I can certainly talk to our colleagues in Scotland who implement more of this type, have implemented more of that kind of play features. Usually what is happening in more schools, rather than designing, putting in kind of more standard play equipment or risky play equipment, what is happening a lot more is loose parts play is coming into action, so that the landscape architect will design the framework of the school grounds and might enable things to happen in the future. So they might be designing the area where you have more wildlife, where the ponds and things like that. They might design a seating areas so that you can gather classes together, and the overall framework. And that is probably more important than trying to incorporate specific play features. But I can certainly ask my colleagues in Scotland who have learnt from what was happening in Berlin and have been incorporated more what might be seen as more typical, if not adventurous and risky play features, but I can certainly ask them about that. It's not something that most schools have to deal with. Most schools aren't putting it, or the schools that we work, most schools aren't putting in that kind of play equipment. Because that's obviously in itself is expensive. And so what often happens is, I say, so that framework, that wider framework of a more naturalistic space with features that don't have that play, they do have play value, but are not designed specifically in that way. Does that make sense?
And we have another one. In the second example that you showed, there's a concern here from Terence about maintenance costs being more high. So I think it's probably good to kind of have those conversations at the start about
absolutely. Absolutely. We always say to schools, whatever changes you're making, it is absolutely vitally important that you can sustain them. We have created some of those kind of large areas of sand in some school grounds up in Scotland, and schools always worry about kind of the dirt and people bringing stuff back into the school. They worry about obviously materials going. So for example, in Scotland, sand can just get blown away. if you have large areas of sand. So they're looking at what alternatives you can have. And in other countries, they're tending to use a more kind of gritty material that you can still use. So in Japan, it's very much just the substrate. It's the ground itself, but it's volcanic, so it's grittier, so it doesn't blow away so much. Others worry about cats, and in fact, we've got on our website, on the information sheets, we've got a resource about creating large areas of sand in school grounds. So if you go to our website, ltl.org.uk, and look at resources and guidance, there should be one there on sand as a material to use. So that probably hopefully helps with that. But it's also getting the pupils to learn how to tidy up and put things away and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, have we any more questions from anyone? That's great. I see the links are coming up in the chat there for people. And I think also we will follow up with an email out to people. I suppose, Mary, if you tell us what's next for us if we want to get in touch, and if
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's very kind of quick overview of kind of the different aspects of school grounds. There's so much more depth to it, obviously, that I can give you in a half an hour presentation. And if you are interested in working with more schools, or you have a particular question, please, my email is in the chat, so please feel free to email me. One of the reasons for doing this was seeing if there would be an interest in doing the accreditation over here. We do run them obviously in the UK, various parts of the UK as well, so you can always join us there. And we're looking at possibly running a course on mainland Europe as well at some point, because that's of interest, but it might not necessarily be the designer course. But if there is enough interest over here, then it could be worth coming over, or if people are otherwise, just keep an eye on our website to see when our course is running. So that's just something, is there an interest from people to do the LTL accreditation?
I would ask you to be specific and say how many people would you need, and kind of give us a ballpark price, just so we have it in the back of our minds.
Yeah, the course itself, it costs, I think it's 660, something like that, for the 2-day course, and the accreditation is that kind of price per person. So it's just kind of making sure we could cover our costs if we were coming over. So you know, 10 dozen people is probably a nice number to work with. And I was going to say something else then. I can't think what, so I'll just have to leave. But yeah, so there's, as I say, opportunities to come over to us, but otherwise, you know, we would be, if there's enough people, we'd absolutely come over to Ireland to run a course over with you.
And you mentioned that if we did get those maybe 10, 12 people, you see it as a good thing to try and get a mix of educators and landscape architects in the room?
Yeah, that's 2 different courses really. So what I would suggest is what I've been doing with the landscape architects, with the designers, we have some horticulturalists as well, but garden designers, but generally landscape architects. We run 4 sessions online kind of in evenings, which obviously doesn't mean I can be wherever it is. And then we'll do a day in person, but what the other course requires is 2 days in person. So how we usually do it is we'd run 2 days, and the second day we bring the designers back in. So we can do it either way. If you can get some educationalists together, and I know Elia, I don't know how to pronounce her name, is also, I think you've been talking with as well, Roisin. She obviously comes from the education side, and she's done that other side of the course. So she can also kind of tell you about that and what's covered. So that course looks much more about learning and play as in delivering it, and how we work with teachers and how we work with children, which is quite different. So yeah, that's the best way of doing it, having a 2-day course. 1 day is just the educationalists. I work online with all the designers for 4 sessions, then we bring everybody together for that second day.
Okay, and we've Debbie Clark here, who's Dublin City Council play officer and really knows what children love inside out, and she's asking can you complete the training if you're not an architect? She's a play specialist. You
would do the other course. If you're not a qualified designer, then you'd probably be doing the other course. which we bring, as I say, bring everybody together on that second day. So.
Yeah, I think that would be really good to bring people together and just get that.
It works really well. It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think if there are no more questions, and the links are there in the chat, we'd like to kind of finish up a little bit early so people can grab something for lunch. Listen, thank you so much, Mary, and thank you everyone for coming on board. And I suppose we are going to follow up with an email out to everybody that's attended and expressed an interest. And then if we do get 10 people, or you can contact Mary directly or contact us in the ILI, and we could try and pursue this further. Thank you so much, everybody.